Perfect. Really excited and honored to have Sonny Vu here joining us. Sonny is one of the most thoughtful people that I have ever met. A true nerd in the kind of the same light of Lumiere. Before I kind of say about the many accomplishments of Sonny, I kind of want to just say the high level of why I thought Sonny would be such an important person to speak to students as they're kind of finishing their research journeys. I think Sonny is a great example of someone who has really dove in deep into research, who has this really deep intellectual vitality and curiosity, and who has channeled that both in the academic realm, but also in the realm outside of academia by building multiple very successful companies. Right now, Sonny is the CEO of Verivo, which is just a fascinating company that's building ultra strong, lightweight continuous carbon fiber, and really helping build new materials that can create new types of things. So very fundamental in terms of the type of entrepreneurship that he's doing, and also, of course, very deeply connected to research. So, Sonny, people can read your many accomplishments, but I'm so happy and thankful for you for joining us for a few minutes to talk a little bit about your experiences. And I'll pass to you, and then we'll pass back and have some students present some of their research.
That sounds great. I'm truly honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I guess I'll get it right into it, and not be the person keeping you guys from lunch or whatever. Look, whenever I get asked to talk at a university, especially for a program like Lumiere, I always feel wholly unqualified to do it, given that I never actually finished my degree at MIT. There were strong reasons to leave academics at the time. The startup world was calling. But it's still something I deeply miss having done, and hope to come back to school someday soon. So you're in a very enviable position, at least for me. Which leads me to the topic for today, because school and the enterprise of learning in general can be, well, academic, as it often has a reputation for. Did I really learn anything in school that was useful in my career? That's a common question people ask. Well, if the answer is no, then what is something that would be valuable to learn? What's the skill for the 21st century? The hard sciences, software skills, UX design, and data science seem to be the measures du jour. And what happens when AI and robots graduate from doing menial tasks to more complex tasks? That's going to be a long conversation I won't get into. For today, I'd like to answer the question of what would be valuable to learn. Let me propose. I'm sorry. Instead of answering the question of what would be valuable to learn, that's a long debate and lots of rich discussion we can have. But let me propose a possibly deeper question, and that is, how can you be more valuable? I don't want to get into a moral philosophical discussion of how to ascribe human value. That's not a really useful thing to do right now, nor am I really qualified to do it. However, since leaving school, I've participated in various capacities in a number of teams, organizations, companies, and causes, things like that. And I've worked with a lot of different people, nearly always in a group setting of some sort. These days, most of these those groups are virtual, like this one right here. And many things, a lot of things haven't really changed. Everyone's looking around the table to see who's bringing what to the table. In the coming years, whether in a study group, a project at work, or a mission to some country for your government, you're going to be a team member, probably in a leadership capacity in some cases. And almost certainly the question comes up for how valuable a particular team member is, whether it's for an award, a raise, a promotion, or in some cases a dismissal. It always comes up, whether out loud or in the minds of the people you work with. It's probably happening right now in some ways. I've personally, I've always been a tech entrepreneur, and to a much less extent an investor. So I'll speak from that perspective. What I've learned can be applicable, I think, to a number of other areas of life, whatever you end up pursuing after your this research program. that you've been a part of. I've been involved in over 40 companies in varying capacities over the last 2 decades in various parts of the world. And here's what I've learned when I think about who the most valuable people were in these companies. So I'll just tell you from that perspective, and then if it translates, great. To start off, when I think about who the most valuable the people in the company are, they are the ones. The first point is that they're usually the ones who think about others first. They know deeply that it's never about them, but about the goal. Their drive is intrinsic, not extrinsic. If I know someone is always, just looking out for their chance to get a raise or a bonus or to get that elevated title, I'm less inclined to think that they're all in with the company or the goal and have the company or their team members' best interests at heart. I don't want to get into this too much since this could easily get moralistic without careful treatment. But it suffices to say that this quality or the lack thereof has profound implications on one's ability to work in a team, to lead a team, to grow a team, establish trust in an organization, and be given more responsibility. So that's the first one is, people who think about others first. I'd say that's the other thing in terms of valuable people is they're almost always eager to serve. I work mostly in the world of tech startups, early stage, high risk technology companies, lots of pressure, faster, right? And they say one of the best things about working at a startup is you get to do things you're not qualified for. In many cases, this is about doing things you've never done or haven't even been trained for. This is about stepping out of your comfort zone and learning as fast as you can, building the car and as you're driving it, as they often say. This is the common mantra, right? And in fact, one of my mentors, Node Khosla, once told me that people are usually limited by what they attempt, not what they're capable of. Another friend and mentor, Dr. Ian Hunter at MIT, one of the greatest inventors of our time, with hundreds of patents and dozens of companies under his belt, told me that part of why he's been able to invent so many things and why people haven't invented them before is because most people didn't think those things were possible, so they didn't even try. So the proverbs go on and on. Go beyond, just do it. Carpe diem, pursue your passions. But getting to do things you're not qualified for has another facet that's important when it comes to teamwork. Many times, the tasks that are the most needed are the ones you're not qualified for, not because you haven't gotten the training, but because you're actually overqualified to do it. In fact, everyone's overqualified to do them, especially the tasks you're not expected to do. Turning off the lights, cleaning up after other people's mess, figuratively or even literally, as the case may be. Taking notes so other people don't have to. The invisible, thankless work that everyone just expects someone else to do. The things that are not in your job description, not a part of your annual goals for your monthly objective and your KPIs, things like that. I truly think industry moves forward, not just by the brilliant dashes of new inventions by the one, but the steady work of countless invisible faces done in the dark, which will never be recognized. Another famous person once said that the meek shall inherit the earth and that the least shall be the greatest. And how true this is, not just in a company, but in life. And for the last point, the most valuable people, they're almost never satisfied. They are never satisfied with what the team can do, but more importantly, never satisfied with what they've done or can do. Now, I'm not just talking about reckless or selfish ambition, but about having perspective of one's accomplishments and how that drives one to grow. Complacency is one of the biggest roadblocks to growth. Bill Gates said success is a lousy teacher. It makes smart people think they can't lose. You think you have enough resources? That's fine. You have enough status? I don't know anyone who says that, but yeah, I guess that's fine too. But have enough understanding? No, so that's just not possible. What does complacency engender? It slows the desire to learn. You think you know enough. It can reduce the desire to connect and truly engage with others. You think you don't need any new perspectives. And it can halt the desire to work. You think you've done or contributed enough. You're ready to retire. Call it a day. I've done enough. My wife and I were talking the other day over breakfast, and she said that she realizes how the most difficult thing is not about being strong. There's a lot of talk about that, about being strong these days, especially for women in the market, in the workplace. In many cases, you just need to be firm. People think it's difficult. It's actually harder to be open-minded because you have to then see things from different perspectives. It's part of why schools like what you see at yeshivas, these are the Jewish religious schools, are so effective and they've created so many great minds, not just Talmudic scholars, but minds that are trained from youth to dissect problems and constantly reanalyze from multiple perspectives. So where does, I digress, sorry. So where does complacency come from? Lack of exposure? Can be. We have limitless access to knowledge. It's called Google and Khan Academy and whatnot, brilliant.org. If you can't afford college, there are dozens of sites with great content. You can have an entire MIT undergraduate education completely for free online, especially for those who drop out. The lack of purpose is one thing, perhaps the primary factor, actually. That could be another long discussion, so I won't talk about that. But another factor, I think, is the lack of role models. We lack heroes. But we have heroes. You know, many of the people that Lumiere can connect you with or can connect you with, for example, I mean, some of these, I mean, from some of the people I've heard about that Steve's told me, they just sound incredible. So maybe what we really need is the opportunity to meet them and a greater commitment to learn, being able to connect with people and to relate, who can really, who we can relate to, who have gone much further. That can be a great motivator. So what's the cure? What should we do to reimagine life, to address the needs, these needs, so we can be more valuable as team members, as in whatever capacity, whatever grouping of humans that we happen to be in? Well, for me, I think it starts by thinking about others first, being eager to serve and continually pushing to never be satisfied. I have some ideas which I'll share another time, but for now I'll leave it to the many great educators, friends, and colleagues you're going to be meeting in the years to come. I think we can start with reflecting on why we want to learn, gaining the perspective and exposure that it's not enough, and acquiring the tools and rituals to for how to learn better. I think that's a good start. So if I had to summarize, I would just say the following, trying to be as pragmatic as, if you could remember one or two things. Look, you're at an incredible point in life. The world really is at your feet. So go live life to the fullest by serving others, and never stop learning so you can get better. So that's those are just a couple of thoughts I had. I kind of scratched together. Hopefully they're useful for folks here, and congratulations on I don't if it's, I guess it's a graduation. So congratulations on the work that you've done.
Thank you so much, Sonny. And I'm really excited for, I think one of the things, saying that you touched on, the work for others is something that is something I really admire about you. It's clearly, from kind of the first time I think we met, you're clearly someone who thinks almost constantly about others. And I think that, combined with just being really excited to learn and to learn new things. We're going to open up some student questions. Students usually have the best ideas and best questions. So I'll open up. If you want to ask a question, just raise your hand using Zoom. And if you can't, I think you should have it. I should be able to do that. And perfect. Elon, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, Mr. Wu. I'm Elan, and the last batch of Lumiere Scholar. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on leadership styles and also just managing a company and looking out for the best people possible. I do have a question regarding 2 points that you have shared. So it's about other-focused and just need to be firm and not necessarily strong. So I personally experienced the difficulty of balancing, like manifesting myself as like me more feeling and caring person, and at the same time, like speak up for myself when I need to. So I I have leadership position in choir, and whenever I address the people in my choir, I would feel that I need to be more firm. But at the same time, I'm afraid that I will be too strict. And I did have feedback about me being either too soft or too firm. And I really find it very hard to manage that. And another incident is in class. So I really wish to engage with the teachers and try to respond when I can. But at the same time, I'm afraid that I would be like too like too vibey in class and may not present myself like with a good impression in front of my classmates. So those are the two instances where I find it very hard to strike a balance between those two qualities. And may not necessarily be contradictory. So I wish to seek your insights into it. Thank you.
Boy, if I knew the answer to your question, I feel like I'd be, much further along than where I am now. But I thought of a couple of concrete things that you might want to try, depending on how accessible these tactics are for you. I mean, there are a lot of tactics, but there are just two that came to mind because you come off as someone who's clearly very thoughtful. And I would just say give you one encouragement, that is, over time, especially in high quality organizations, you kind of realize who the smart, who like, I'll tell you another, like, what makes a person valuable, someone who is like truly selfless and like, and you just can trust is for the goal, it's all about the company or the goal or the organization or the goal and not about themselves. They're not in it just for themselves. And so they have like a lot of trust and they're constantly serving others. Yeah, look, great. That's fine. But the other thing that makes people really valuable is when they're right all the time. So if you're right all the time, over time, people kind of recognize that. And I just think about like my partner Sridhar, he's like this really smart guy, much smarter. He's the smart one between the two, me and him, right? And he doesn't say much. He's like a real introvert. He's very quiet, but when he says stuff, he's like almost always right. And he only says a few words, and everyone like shuts up and listens because he's just right. When Sri speaks, he's like, the man, he's like, oh, what's he saying? And because he's an introvert, and the people have gotten used to that, they just kind of everyone just kind of shuts up. It's like, because he also doesn't speak very loud. He doesn't project his voice. And so for someone who has never really had that booming presence and that's often valued in various places, he's done really well because he's just thoughtful and right a lot. The two tactics. First one, humor is pretty awesome. If you can figure out if you can get good at humor and like poke fun at yourself, especially if something's relevant and you say bam, and it's just kind of a funny thing and you can get people to laugh, you can really command a lot of attention without a very loud voice, because people, so that's one. But the humor's hard to pull off, by the way, because you got to be quick on your feet and not be offensive. But self-effacing humor is one of the best ways to do it. Second one is asking really awesome questions. That's asking awesome questions is like useful, like universally, right? But if you can kind of just bam, drop that grenade as in this, like, wow, that is the question of the day. Thanks for asking, Elon. Do you have any potential answers? So you can say, well, here's my question. I mean, I think this might be the answer, but what does everyone else think? That's another way where you can't possibly be viewed as a pushover or a dictator. You're asking a question, whatever, So I don't know. Those are just that came to the top of my mind.
Okay. Thank you so much. Think about it.
Yeah, and over time, by the way, you're going to get better at all this. I mean, you guys are high school students, right? So it's amazing. Like, I wasn't asking questions like this at your age.
Pass to Shinel.
Thank you so much for providing your thoughts on student life and creativity. Now, I know you're a huge visionary in the tech world. So although I'm heading into the medicine field, what do you generally hope for in the next generation, which is us, in driving technology and humanity forward?
Oh, man. It's, what do I hope for? I think I hope for hope. People always say, oh, life is short. live it to the fullest. And I'm like, man, that is just like, these days, I really disagree with that. Life is long, man. Like the work that you're going to do, that you're contributing to that body of work, we're going to be aging 25 years over the next 30 years. And the 30 years after that, we're going to age 20 years. You think you're going to live 60 years? Guess what? It's going to be 90 years. Okay. Everyone here, I think you're going to be living 150 years short of catastrophes. And if we don't blow ourselves up and get hit by an asteroid, or hit by a gamma ray burst. So I think, it's a lot. So, and with AI and robotics coming, like in the next generation of science, a lot of work is going to get wiped out. So I think it's going to be about finding hope and finding meaning for what we do. And so, sorry, it's kind of a generic answer, but I think it's true. In terms of like things to work on that are cool, I think aside from all the software stuff, right? AI, right? I think there are some profound advances in medicine that are going to happen. And if you are working in that field, I think you're going to contribute to not just longevity, but much higher quality of living for many, many more people. So, yeah, if we can talk more if you want, but there are definitely specific fields as well. I happen to be interested in certain fields, but that's just me.
Pass to Dax.
Hi, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. But as Chanel mentioned that, you are a visionary in the tech world. So my question to you was that how do you identify what new innovation has the potential for success? Like, there's so much happening in the tech world always, like there's NFTs, there's crypto, there's new things popping every day. So how do you make sure that what you are doing at the moment is actually viable for future commercial users?
Yeah, I'll second what Dhruva said. That's an awesome question. I'll just say that there's making money, and then there's solving problems that are worthy of solving, and both are things that people do in the tech world, right, among many other things. And for me, I have been obsessed about I've been obsessed about deep tech for climate change. So things that probably won't work. Okay, deep tech is like really hard technology, stuff that kid in a unless most kids would not be able to pull off in a garage. Most 25-year-olds couldn't do just right out of college or whatever. It's stuff that is born out of scientific breakthroughs and whatnot. And but it probably won't work. But if it does, it's really needle changing. And I think working on climate related stuff is so worthy of working on of pursuit. If there really isn't climate change, then we found some awesome physics and developed some great chemistry, and it's awesome. If we do have a climate crisis, then we better freaking work on this now. So we should have been working on it for the last couple generations of science, but we haven't because we're idiots. But we it's really good that some great minds are working on it, and I hope more great minds will work on it, and I hope more great minds will like really try out some wild things, because we really need some wild things to turn this clock back around. So that's a pretty worthy thing. So how do I identify really cool stuff to work on? First of all, I don't know if I'm very good at it, but the way I do it for myself is finding problems that are worthy to work on, that especially if people aren't really working on it. I'll give you one example. Like, what do you think is one of the top 2 causes of greenhouse gases? Everyone was like, oh, it's all the dang cars, electric vehicles. I'm like, no. Electric vehicles is apparently 26 on the list in terms of helping with greenhouse gases. 26. You think with all this hype, it would be like 2 or something. It's not. Or it's all the food waste and the animal stuff. No. It's actually the number 1 listed thing. When you 3 times larger when you combine all of transportation, cars, planes, trains, automobiles, all that, 3 times more. It's air conditioning. Can you believe that? Like, who would have thought? I didn't believe it at first when it's heating and ventilation, air conditioning. And And so, that's a pretty cool thing to work on. And so we've invested in a few companies in the air conditioning, and I don't know if they're going to work, but if they do, I think it'll be pretty game changing. So worthy problems, climate tech in general.
Pass to our final question from Leah.
Hi, Dr. Wu. I'm really
I never graduated. I'm
grateful.
not a doctor. So.
Oh, okay. So, what can I call you?
Just call me Sonny. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Hi, Sonny. I'm really grateful for your valuable speech, and I'm really agree with your values. We should challenge ourselves to keep learning, and also we need to serve the world to make contributions. And I have searching you on Google and found out your LinkedIn account. I found out that you're a CEO doing startup, but also before that you are a researcher. And I'm really interested in these two positions because I think it's a totally different positions. In my point of view, being a researcher, you need to dig in an academic area to be really specific and to be really in depth. But when you're an CEO to doing setup, you need to communicate with people from different areas. You may not spend so many time doing research on a specific area. You need to communicate with others and spending time with others, not doing research on your own. So I just want to ask how you make transition between these two roles, and what's the difference and similarity do you think in these two roles? Thank you.
Yeah, awesome question. Well, I didn't plan on being in business, it just kind of happened, and I've just pursued it because doors were open. A lot of it was providence, to be honest, rather than, as they say, better lucky than good, right? So I don't know if there really was a transition other than I just made a bunch of really stupid mistakes early in my business career, just completely oh my gosh, if I there are textbooks on them that I should have read, which I didn't. So I don't know if school ever really prepared me for that. We're immigrants, and certainly didn't teach you in immigrant school how to sell stuff, right? So they should. That's something that they should teach you, but they don't. But I think curiosity. I think as a researcher, you're part of your job is to be curious, right? And so I think an important part of working in business and being successful is being curious and an ability to learn and a desire to learn. But I still go back to, when it's serving others, it isn't a generic call to serve the world. Oh, let's all make the world a better place. No, I'm talking about every group that you're in, every classroom you're in, the way you participate, every interaction you have, every project you work on, every company, division you work for. Jump in to do the things that other people don't want to do because you just want to help other people. And you're going to be noticed by the team lead, or maybe you are the team lead or whatnot. They will know. They're like, man, Liao always just takes care of people. We love her, and that's the most valuable thing to do. And don't worry that it's oh man, if I take out the trash all the time, I'm never going to get a chance to do my real work. It's not true. That's not true. Do it. And don't do it to seek a recognition. Do it because you generally want to just serve the greater team and the purpose. So yeah, I just want to be clear that my exhortation to serve isn't let's make the world a better place. That's a little bit too hard to work with. But hopefully that's useful. I think the point is the transitions are totally doable. And starting life as a researcher sounds like a great thing to do. Don't let people dissuade you from doing that. It's oh man, if you do a PhD, you're never going to be able to do business or whatever because your mind's going to be like this. It's not true. Not true. You can do you can do, there's lots of people who do that. And yeah, so all the best to that.
Thank you so much.
Sonny, do you have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I've got tons of time. Yeah,
Okay,
all
well,
yours. It's whether you have time for it, because you have like 20
do.
people to present stuff. Yeah.
Presentation. So, well, why don't
Yeah.
we wrap up with these final 2 presentations?
Sure.
Misha, why don't you go ahead and then pass to Shravi after that? Misha, I'll pass to you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for the valuable feedback you've given so far. It's been really helpful. So basically, currently for high schoolers, there's a lot of programs telling us how to design and spot problems, but they never conclude it and they never teach us how to implement them. That can be a huge struggle out there. Personally, I worked on this footstep hour generator and we've been trying to implement it for a really long time, but we just can't get the right people to back us up. So do you have any like suggestions for that, how to gather funds and how to get people to support you?
Yeah. How to gather support. In the startup world, it's called how to raise money. And yeah, that's really hard. I mean, unfortunately, in the startup world, what I learned early in life is that you either got to be rich, connected, or you got to be really lucky. And so if you're neither of the first 2, which was me, then you got to make some luck. You gotta stand in the way of luck, of that luck train, right? Now, it is not fully true that just excellent work will just naturally get noticed. I mean, the statements like that will always be true at a certain extreme, but in general, I think there's also, I think as we all know, it's making sure that the message is heard. That it's like, oh wow, that is cool work that you did. Let's talk more about it. But I would say one thing. I think when you clear articulation and exposition, and where you're able to kind of teach people things and like be very clear about what you've done, not only demonstrates the power of what you've learned and what you know, but it's actually just, you're just being really useful to people. And by being really useful, I think you can often get your voice heard. Because oftentimes it's not like, hey, listen to me, but it's, oh, what can I do for you? And you keep doing that and say, wait, but what do you do? Oh, I do this. Wow, that sounds really interesting. Tell me more, and that's kind of it's kind of how I got my first break, to be honest. I volunteered to be a Hebrew tutor, and it was kind of weird for a random Asian kid to teach some other Jewish kids how to speak Hebrew. And then they're like, well, what do you do? Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Mr. Rich Jewish person. I'm doing a startup. And are you looking for investment? Well, of course. What do you know? And well, then we'd love to invest in you. That's how I got investment in my first company. Is the language trick always works. But I think, yeah, to start by being just really useful to someone whose attention you might want to whose attention you might want to get. And that's right. Yeah, I don't know if that's the moral of the story, but only works if you're Asian. If you're not, I don't know, but you get as much credit. You gotta learn Vietnamese like Steven.
Shall we pass to you for the final question?
Okay. Hi, Sonny. Thank you so much for speaking to us. It was like very eye-opening. So I know that you have startups, and going back to Dax's question, you had answered that if you think a problem is worth it, you should invest in it. So my question is when would you stop being invested in it? If something's not working, no matter how hard you try, when you should stop?
Yeah, wow. That's the $1 million question, literally in some cases for startups. Because there's the Churchill never give up approach, and then there's the you got to pivot and blank approach to startup life. And those are literally the 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. And as an entrepreneur, what you're trying to accomplish is what's called product market fit, where it just seems effortless to sell something. It's just effortless. You just say it, and you're like, "Whoa, man, I would love that." How about a wearable activity tracker that makes you look better? Right, sign me up. How about like, I don't know, a way to make things 30% lighter instantly so that you can have lighter cars, airplanes, trains, whatever. Sign me up. That sounds amazing. You know, like product market fit, right? And if you constantly are not, you're not in that flow of, you know, where things are flowing, you should consider what in the startup parlance pivoting, you know, shifting what you're doing, because there's but I don't know, that's the startup world. I mean, does it really apply to like deep tech and fundamental problems? You know, I'm not sure. I have a great answer for that, but in the startup world, it's about whether you're at this moment of product market fit and how easy it is, how so obviously easy it is to sell something. And I think you know it in your heart as an entrepreneur, you know it in your heart when something is easy or not easy to sell.
Tavi, you've thrown yourself in there after the last question. I'll have to do your props for just going for it. Would you ask the final? This is the final question.
Yep.
Exerting very little authority right now. Tavi, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Steven, for letting me ask, and thank you so much, Sonny, for all of the advices and feedbacks that you've given so far. As high schoolers, especially like us, and even from like areas which aren't that developed right now, we kind of learn how to create opportunities for ourselves when we don't find any. So till what point does that actually help us, like making opportunities for ourselves or starting something new to create something for ourselves to actually work in, because we don't find any other opportunities, especially for high schoolers, because people usually label us like too young to work, or if you're a girl, especially in developing countries, that you're a girl, you can't work and all of that, and you just learn to create opportunities for yourself. But till what point in your life does that actually help and actually work out?
So let me try to understand your question. The question is, at what point? Yeah, I mean, maybe the question is, at what point is it easy to get a meaningful role of some sort, or how does one land a meaningful role like that? Maybe that's another version of the question. Yeah, you know, like I remember when it's high school kids, I would lean over to my best friend Nathan and say, "Man, do you think we'll ever get jobs? Do you think anyone will ever hire us? Because I mean, we're pretty useless, you know, like we can blow things up and like ride bikes and stuff, but kind of we can't do stuff, you know. We can lift things and mow people's yards, you know. They would just mow yards for a long time." And then he's like, "You know, I asked my dad and he's got a job and he said you guys are going to get a job someday. Don't worry about it." And I would actually, and he was right. Nathan was right. I would say that to everyone here. Like, everyone's going to get a job. Okay. Now the question is whether the job is meaningful and it's fulfilling for you and that kind of thing, right? And whether you feel like you're making a difference. And I would say that there's a couple of things I would comment on that comment. The first is meaningfulness and whatnot is truly a matter of perspective, you know, and it's, yeah. So, having the perspective to say, no, what I'm doing matters. I don't care what anyone says, what people say, what's the, you know, it matters. Like if being a father, stay-at-home father is what gives you the greatest joy and meaning, you know, go for it, because, and no one can take that, you know, and people don't value fatherhood, you know, they don't, it's not cool. Like your father, like if you know, Stephen came back for his 10th year Harvard reunion and people are like, "Hey, I'm CEO of whatever. How about you, Steve?" You know, and he's like, "I'm a stay-at-home dad," you know, like no one's going to think it's cool, you know, but he can think it's cool. And if it is, that's then that's the kind of fundamentally what matters. Or, you know, like if I were to go back 25, that's what I would tell myself. But the other part of it is going back to, I hate to be a broken record, but just being useful. Because oftentimes if you're like, "Hey, high school student, look, I'm like, you know, just you can judge me for how you're going to judge me, but in terms of how smart I am. But let me just do stuff for you. Let me just do stuff for you for free, okay? And then let me work my way up. And there have been there's so many people I've known who just kind of go right in and just say, let me just do for just be useful, and they've like instantly within weeks, if not or months, if not weeks, it's like, oh no, yeah, that person's pretty useful, man. Let's you feel bad, you got to pay this person at some point. So I just want to, just useful and make sure you have a good perspective on things, a healthy perspective.
Thank you so much, Sonny, for these questions. I feel like you're a dad, and you're clearly a teacher and someone who I think is just someone I always turn to for advice, and I can really see that playing out here with these questions. So I really appreciate you coming, and sad to transition. Unless there's like another cheeky student who's gonna like roll in with a raised hand. I hope not, because we're gonna pass to the next part of the ceremony, which is to hear some students and their research and really cool things that they've been doing over.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna mute myself.
Thanks, Sonny. Okay, and I will pass to our head of program operations, Prakriti, who is fabulous and super smart and kind, and has really been running the show to introduce our student speakers.
Thank you. I think Sonny, of course, I'm not in high school anymore, but so much of what you said just applies to me in my life right now. And of course, Stephen, for managing all those questions, including the sneaky Tanvi and her raised hand. With that, we will now transition into one of sort of our standing Lumiere graduation traditions, which is scholar presentations. We're super excited to be seeing everything that our students have done over the last 3 months. I know research can be a super rocky road, so the fact that you have made it here is in and of itself a really big thing, and this is where we see whether or not you made it here and whether or not it was ultimately worth it. But some very exciting presentations across various disciplines by some of our scholars. So let's jump into it. I will pass it over to Misha, who will be telling us a bit more about her project, which was on the influence of dirty air and slipstream on the F1 racing in 2021 or 2022. Misha, I will let you take the floor.
Thank you. Hello, fellow researchers. I'm Maisha Rahman, and my research question was, how has the influence of dirty air and slipstream changed Formula One racing in 2022 as compared to the previous year? I would like to thank Lumiere for this wonderful opportunity and my mentor, Carl Geiger, for all of his help. Now let's move on to the background. Next slide, please. Yeah. Formula One is the highest class of international racing for open-wheel single-seater cars sanctioned by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, also known as the FIA. With teams spending up to $140 million per year, the cars developed contain extraordinary technology. Every year, regulations for a new car are proposed by the FIA, and the motorsport teams are obliged to design their car accordingly. In 2022, the FIA proposed an aerodynamic vehicle designed to create more wheel-to-wheel racing and more action on the track. A lot of effort was put into this creation, with Formula One's motorsports team running approximately 7,500 simulations testing this model. These changes could be easily observed on track during the first few races of the season. Next slide, please. Now we're moving on to the methodology. I started the paper with a literature review. Through that, I was able to give readers a base for essential concepts needed to understand the changes. This literature review went into detail about the aerodynamics of a Formula One car, covering aerodynamic principles, paths, and important terminology. The paper then moved on to a data analysis. Through this, I was able to summarize the new regulations stated by the FIA with regard to the previous year's model. After that, with the help of my mentor, I used data from CFD analyses done to test the velocity flow for the 2022 and 2021 car models. CFD simulations basically use numerical analysis and data structures to accurately represent the fluid flow around a body. I believe that this was an important aspect of the project, as Formula One itself used CFD as a tool to design the cars and test them. With the help of data obtained from these, I was able to conclude the rest of the changes made. Can you move on to the next slide? Let's have a look at some of the CFD results now. Yeah, these CFD results were obtained from Fetch CFD and Race Car Engineer. Initially, I identified that dirty air and slipstream production was changed substantially and is playing a huge role in racing now. Dirty air refers to the turbulent air produced by a car, and slipstream refers to a low pressure zone created behind the car. Dirty air slows down a car, whereas slipstream gives it an advantage in terms of speed. Through figures 1 and 2, we can observe that there has been a significant reduction in turbulent air production, and the new model also redirects this turbulence above the following car and reduces its effect. It can also be observed that there has been a significant increase in the height of airflow for the new model. This creates a low pressure zone behind the leading car. Can you move on to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. Figures 3 and 4 show a decrease in the density of airflow following the car. This implies a decrease in turbulence and a reduction in air pressure behind the car as well. The final slide. Yeah, moving on to the conclusion now. From the CFD simulation, I was able to conclude that dirty air production had been reduced and slipstream production had increased. Because of this, a car following another would have an easier time overtaking it in 2022 than it did in 2021, confirming all the claims that had been made by a Formula One team. Thank you all for listening. If you're intrigued by this topic, I would encourage you to research about the cons of the new regulations, a major one being porpoising. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Maisha. I think that
I think Bharti may have cut out. So maybe Shreya, would you be able to take over sharing screen? Oh,
did I drop off?
you dropped off for a second. Yep.
It's on me. But yes, I was just saying thank you so much. I think this really offers so much insight on the back end of F1 racing, and it's not just people zapping around the Grand Prix, and there's a lot that goes into it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Our next speaker is Ilan, who has done some very exciting research on individualized research approaches. And Ilan, I will pass it over to you to take the stage.
Thank you, Prakriti. So hi, I'm Ilan, and I'm greatly honored to present my leadership research for the second time at the Lumiere Research Symposium. First and foremost, I'd like to express my ultimate gratitude to my mentor, Elizabeth, and writing coach, Karen. It is with their professional guidance and support throughout my journey that makes all of it possible. So in this research, I propose the individualized leadership approaches and posit the leadership development experience is highly individualistic. I discovered the relationship between personality and leadership styles as well. Could you go to the next page, please? So this part notion is worthy of discussion as leadership is highly relevant, complex, and intriguing. First of all, leaders makes a difference in various ways, like a business manager who tasks staff to contact potential distributors, or a student council president who initiate thank you card writing after the planning of a celebration. So these are some very down-to-earth examples, and leadership does also concerns higher purposes, which are different from the idea of management. So management is about doing things right, and leadership is about doing the right thing. And therefore, scholars like Peter Drucker have conducted extensive research on leadership and leadership styles. There exists many theories on leadership models, and two prominent ones are trait theory, which focuses on a coherent set of human traits that demonstrate individual uniqueness, and the situational theory, which highlights the leader's selective leading styles for different situations. There are three prominent leadership styles: authoritarian leadership, democratic leadership, and laissez-faire leadership. However, there is a problem of overgeneralization about these theories, as with most models, which can lead to significant discrepancies from reality and subsequently low practical value. Based on the examples above, we can see that the famous thinkers tend to focus on asserting leadership's essential qualities and responsibilities, which can be a rather sweeping approach. To resolve this issue, a scholar named James Schooler proposed that internal psyche of the leaders play a vital role in delivering their influence to the followers. However, still, little attention has been paid to the sheer differences in individual leaders. So everyone is unique, and surely every leader is unique, right? And this is significant because the psychological uniqueness may contribute significantly to the lack of applicability of the well-known leadership theories. To facilitate my discussion, I highlight the flexibility of leadership style by defining leadership as a trainable skill where the individual leaders possess agency in determining the final goals, such as a specific leadership style. Would you like to go to the next page? Thank you. I begin by providing a literature review on how individual personality corresponds to the different leadership qualities. Then I detailed James Schooler's integrated psychological theory, which emphasizes that self-mastery is the key to establishing a genuine leadership presence that is organically flexible under different circumstances. However, this is still limited. Despite addressing some significant limitations of the prior theories, the integrated psychological theory at best transformed practical impossibility into practical difficulties. This is because the goal of self-mastery being a prerequisite for effective leadership is inherently psychological and requires a slow and gradual learning process. I then employed the methodology of qualitative interviews. I conducted and examined interviews with 10 plus leaders from various backgrounds, like schools, tuition centers, and regarding how different factors, especially their personality, plays a part in the development of the leadership styles. And I also collected their Ocean Big Five personality traits, which entail openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism through self-reported surveys for more nuanced analysis. Would you like to go to the next page? Thank you. So there were a list of findings in this research, and I would like to highlight to you several of them. To begin, I found that individuals who are inclined to leadership positions mostly have received leadership opportunities in their past, which tends to result from their idiosyncratic personalities. So to give a very down-to-earth example is teachers would usually select the most outspoken students in primary school to let them be the class monitor. And next, individuals choose to actively pursue a certain way of leading, and their individual leadership approaches are largely based on their personality and personal beliefs, even though they know that their leadership style may not be ideal for the specific situation. Their personality and personal beliefs are often developed early in their life as well. Finally, I found that the professions of the individuals can also influence their personality and personal beliefs, which then affect their individualized leadership approach. To summarize, I contributed by incorporating psychological analysis as a mediating variable in examining leadership styles instead of limiting them at the organizational level. Specifically, I investigated how personality traits can make the leadership experience highly individualized. So despite factors like inaccurate memory, objective biases, and a small sample size which can limit the validity of my research, I believe my research is still significant in the sense that it's inspiring meaningful future directions. So future researchers can similarly focus on incorporating analysis on the level of personality psychology or even neurobiological into leadership research on the organizational level. They can also explore the correlation between the styles of leadership and factors like psychologically formative life events or neuropsychological functions. To conclude, this unique research journey with Lumiere team and my mentor has allowed me full agency in the research direction while staying on track to a meaningful destination. I especially appreciate how the inputs of my interviewees have directed my research question towards an unexpected but rewarding route. And I'm really, really grateful for the platform Lumiere has provided us through the symposium, where we get to present our 3 months of heart and sweat to a group of amazing audience. I sincerely thank you for your attention and I wish you a good time ahead. Thank you.
Ilan, that was amazing. That was so relevant. I think very coincidentally ties in so well with everything Sonny sort of mentioned, especially when we're sort of thinking about management, leadership, and I'm sure Stephen has been nerding out this entire presentation because it's organizational behavior. And I think the insights that you've provided are so valuable and so relevant. Qualitative research can be some of the more sort of taxing sort of research methodology in many aspects, but it's lovely to see you break into that at such an early stage. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
I would love to pass the stage on to Chanel, who has done some very exciting work on the intersection of AI and COVID. Chanel, if you would be down, are you here? Yes, perfect. The floor is yours.
Hey everyone, and thanks for bearing me, Lumiere team. My name is Mohammed Shinal Haq. You can call me Shinal. And my mentor for the cohort was PhD candidate Arpurav Hishkar from Yale University. And together we sought out to figure out how AI has been used towards sort of detecting and mapping the spread of COVID-19 in our research paper titled AI's Rise Within the Scope of COVID-19, a comparative study between AI-based and non-AI-based methodologies in the pandemic. Next slide, please. All right, so before we dive in, let me introduce myself to share why I care so deeply about this field. I'm a rising 12th grade student and ethnically come from Bangladesh. So it's a relatively small yet densely packed, rapidly growing country. But in terms of nationality, I'm from Minnesota, the United States. My roots within medicine go a long way. Since Bangladesh found its independence in 1971, medicine was and still is at its most sort of bare bones state and simply is not the best when you compare it to the sort of developed world. And so I had to witness my family's suffering throughout my childhood. And after that, I just knew I had to do something about it. And so I fell in love with medicine, striving to create change. And around June of 2021, I finished my first research paper with Lumiere about the inequalities in health technologies, of which several derived opinion articles I've written have gotten published on the Bangladesh National News. And so it's part of my motivation to alleviate poverty with my own charity that I've created, the Hawk Foundation, and having been able to help over 500,000 Bangladeshis over the course of 1 to 2 years. And in fact, my charity is soon to be featured live on national television in a couple of days. In relation to the question I asked Sonny, I'm currently at a 7-week Harvard Secondary School online program in neurobiology and having been accepted since it's a field I really want to advance with the numerous technological research able to be done. All right, next slide. So putting my history within this field aside, I'm here today to present my findings from the most pressing issues of today. COVID-19 has severely impacted all of those around us, whether it be for economic reasons or simply health reasons. And moreover, this pandemic has been so severe that most scientists had no clue of the mechanisms that made up this virus at the start of the pandemic. While medical students began looking for a cure in whichever way possible, engineers began looking at how this strong suit could aid in mediating this pandemic, and specifically through AI. So either convolutional neural networks helping with X-ray and CT scan detection, or even recurrent neural networks helping with detection by cough sounds through a smartphone app, or even through mathematical predictive modeling for governments to see if their laws and regulations have been efficient or not. Next slide, please. So my paper is a literature review of all the research conducted using AI frameworks. And seeing as I had very little to no knowledge on AI prior to writing my paper, as I'm more technical on the medical side, I was learning while reading the papers to which I used for the final draft. And this was key for me since a literature review aims to evaluate thoroughly of literature available on the topic. Now, since AI is very much in development within the COVID-19 pandemic, I've left most of my inclusion criteria very open to sort of get a collective grasp. However, even having left most of that inclusion criteria open, did I have trouble finding relevant papers? But in the end, and thankfully, I was able to use more than 50 papers to provide a well-drafted review of the current situation. Next slide. To start, let's begin by summarizing the results for CNN-based detection. Now, in each study, and for me to compare between the models, I used the general 4 criteria bands: specificity, sensitivity, accuracy, and precision. These performance metrics allowed me to pinpoint strengths and weaknesses for every model. And subsequently, these performance metrics were tested with various types of CNNs. And what I mean by this is that researchers have taken the stock basis of the CNN and altered specific functions of the system to propose their own model. For example, the UNet++, ResNet 50, and RF platforms are rooted from this basics and stock CNN framework. And by comparing all of these models, it was evident no single model had won in all performance metrics, but it was rather 3 different models that made up the best image detection system: UNet++, ResNet 50, and the stock CNN. Next, for RNNs, I evaluated one of the most popular detection systems coined AI for COVID-19, a smartphone app developed to detect COVID-19 from cough sounds. And developed through only one AI model, the framework had been in development prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, but enforced during, due to the pandemic best fitting its use. When using the same performance metrics used to compare CNN models, it was found that all metrics were only 1% fewer than the 3 combined CNN systems, at roughly 95% for all. And so, considering this accuracy of junior practicing radiologists, one single RNN model has a surprisingly high performance, despite being more complicated. And this finding is significant and will be explained just how in a later slide. Lastly, AI predictive modeling systems were examined to find out ways that they are incorporated for governments to best mediate the transmission of the pandemic. And what I was able to find is that no single AI predictive model is used worldwide, but rather several iterations of the same base. However, all models possess effective measures for dictating the transmission of the pandemic in countries. For the most part, it's able to make accurate future predictions based on past trends. But some models may not account for new variants, but rather a general spike once in a while. Despite its shortcomings, it is still at the forefront for determining how well policy measures have been implemented. Now, what does all of that mean? Next slide. Well, for one, due to the fact that the pandemic is starting to come to an end with vaccinations, we may never see a time, unfortunately, when AI is incorporated to diagnose COVID-19 because it has still not been FDA approved and requires 3 distinct AI methods of CNNs. And moreover, there will be significant costs alone for AI working in tandem with CT scans and X-rays that one would rather simply have a biological rapid antigen test or an RT-PCR assay instead of a non-invasive detection system. And hence, image-based detection for COVID-19 may seem far-fetched in this point of the pandemic, but further research into how this could be implemented in other fields of medicine could be done. With RNN-based detection, if it can be developed and put on smartphone app stores for free, then it would be beneficial and could serve as the primary consideration for COVID-19 rather than antigen tests. Less economically developed countries could utilize this and would be helpful in mediating the pandemic as it comes to a close. And lastly, AI predictive models is and should still be in use as it serves as one of the key data points used to determine the effectiveness of COVID-19 policies due to its high accuracy and performance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Shanal. I think big fan of the first slide, the contextualization of this entire project. And I think your space in the sort of AIX medicine industry is just so relevant, of course, so topical. I think you've raised some really important questions about the way we're developing medicinal technology in terms of the speed at which it's developed versus by when is the need for it exhausted. So right now, when sort of COVID seems to be fading away in many parts of the world, I imagine the speed at which this research is conducted also slows down. But so useful, and thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. We will now be taking a short 3 to 4 minute break. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of scholarship that has been presented to us. So let's come back in 3 minutes for the remaining presenters. And we've got some very exciting fields in presentations in gender studies and our natural sciences. So let's take 3 and we'll be back. Hi, everyone. I hope that we've had a chance to hydrate and get refreshed for the upcoming presentations that are as exciting as the ones that have just come past. So let's just give everyone 10 to 15 seconds to come back on. Meanwhile, Kamakshi, I hope you're prepared for what looks to be a super promising research project presentation. Kamakshi will be talking about female representation in ancient Mesopotamian art and its eventual decline. So whenever you're ready, Kamakshi, you can take the stage.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kamakshi Seth, and I recently completed my research program with Lumiere. I was mentored by Ms. Maria Magdalena Gujuska, and she guided me really well through the course of the program. I worked in the area of ancient history and archaeology. So the research question that I worked on was, why does female representation in ancient Mesopotamian art decline significantly from the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BCE? And the hypothesis that I used was that the decline in women's status in society led to their diminishing representation in art. Next slide, please. Okay, so my research paper is divided into 3 main sections. The first section aims at political and administrative structure of ancient Mesopotamia. The second section is more specific to women and is divided into 3 subparts, which are legal codes, such as the Code of Arnamu, which state provisions and laws which were followed during that time under the rule of a specific ruler. And the second subpart is burials, followed by the third subpart, which is on seals. The third main section focuses on case studies and case study analysis. Next slide, please. Okay. Coming on to methodology, the first 2 sections of my paper are primarily based on literature review. I've used sources such as Ancient Iraq by Georges Roux and other previous works on Mesopotamian history by scholars such as Claudia Sutter, Adelaide Otto, Zainab Virani, Susan Pollock. I also read a lot more papers, even though I didn't incorporate the information in my research paper. I think reading them provided me with different views and ideas I could approach my question with. The last section of my paper is based on case study analysis. The case studies were taken from online catalogs of the Metropolitan Museum and the British Museum. Next slide, please. So coming on to findings, there are different conclusions from different parts of my paper, and they collectively answer the main research question. So first, politically, when we look at the administrative systems which were followed under different rulers, we see that they get more and more structured as we progress. Secondly, the comparison of previous legal codes to the more recent legal codes, such as the Old Babylonian Code of Hammurabi, shows that there was a change in status of women. However, it was also the same for men. We also see a decline in the representation of professional women on seals. However, this can be described as a change in aesthetic tastes. Case studies show that men and women were represented differently. For instance, male sculptures had more fine, delicate, detailed patterns and groovings compared to more thick and bold lines in female sculptures. My research does state that the status of women really declines as we move from the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BCE. But there are some facts or previous findings which might hold that statement back. And I want to work more on this area so that I can reach a more structured, concrete result. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Kamakshi. I think your research, art, and how effectively it can really represent the fabric of the society it's made of. And I love that you were able to use, of course, your interests are in archaeology and history, but I love that you were able to use these facets to talk about such an important social change between these millennia. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next presenter is Liao, who has a very catchy title. I love it already, but will be discussing whether digital is the future of diagnosis with a special emphasis on the COVID-19 situation. Liao, I will pass it on to you to tell us more about this.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Liao Wang, and I'm the author of the paper, Is Digital the Future of Diagnosis? A review on detecting COVID-19 with artificial intelligence. So first and foremost, I would give the gratitude to my mentor, writing coach, and program manager. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's some background information. As known to all, COVID-19 has been a really severe global health issue because it can be spread in a really fast rate and also cause severe damage to human body. Therefore, effective interventions to prevent it from further spread is really crucial. And artificial intelligence methods play a really important role in doing so. And neural networks is really a popular area in artificial intelligence. Neural networks are formed by interconnected artificial neurons, which are trained to recognize images. And I will talk about two kinds of models. The first one is CNN, convolutional neural networks. It contains special layers called convolutional layer, which are used to extract features better. And also GNN, which are called generative adversarial neural networks. This kind of neural networks contain two kinds of models, the generator and the discriminator. The generator is used to generate more images, like it will make some fake images from the real images so that your data set can be enlarged. And the discriminator is used to tell the difference between the fake and the real, so it can improve the accuracy from training and training again. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's my methodologies. Since I'm writing a literature review, my main source of research paper come from PubMed. And here's some keywords I use for my first round of research, including COVID-19, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. And after reading the paper I download for the first round of research, I classify them into different categories and select some are useful to me. Finally, I decided to focus on the area of diagnosis. So I use X-ray, CNN, GNN, CT scans, cough sound as my second round of research keywords. And then I decided to include some case studies to show and to give some specific ideas about how AI are applied in diagnosis from images and cough sounds. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here's my findings. Firstly, I think CNN and GNN are both have a really high accuracy. As you can see in the first two pictures, CNN has a roughly 90% of accuracy, while GNN have a roughly 100% of accuracy. Secondly, diagnosis using artificial intelligence can enlarge the testing capacity of traditional AI methods. As you can see in the table, the testing capacity can be enlarged by over 30 and 40%, which is really impressive. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here comes to my conclusion. In response to my title, Is Digital the Future of Diagnosis? I think AI methods are really effective than the non-AI methods because it can have a larger testing capacity and also produce a higher accuracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Liao. I think exactly what Stephen mentioned, that's what I was also thinking about, the fact that you and Chanel worked on relatively similar topics and the different approaches that you took really shows the breadth of research and work that can be done in this field. I think this is something that's sort of constantly developing, and I love that you were able to tell us all a bit more about it through your project today. for our final scholar presentation, I would love to call Tanvi onto our Zoom stage, quote unquote, as she discusses what is the impact of growing up in a male-dominated household for women who sort of want to enter the job market. Tanvi, I will pass it on to you when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Prakriti. Hi, I'm Tanvi from Siliguri, India. Firstly, thank you so much, Lumet, for this opportunity to present my paper here in front of this incredible audience. And a very sincere thank you to my mentor, Siobhan. My research is based on the question, how does growing up in a male-dominated household affect women in India in pursuing career aspiration in sciences and math? So why this question? Different subjects and careers have been associated with different genders for a very long time. This goes for science and math as well. Most women that grow up in India face some or the other kind of gender discrimination at some point in their lives. That includes me in it as well. Male-dominated families and joint families are again highly common family structure in India. My question makes us wonder whether our career aspirations have been influenced or not, and how these factors are all interconnected to each other. This leads us to the background. Next slide, please. The background is divided into three main parts of my research: career aspiration, influence of family, and women in science and math. Career aspirations are usually heavily influenced by the family and surroundings. Exposure, parental expectations, and the family we grow up in play a prominent role in our career aspiration. Role shared by our parents in the household is also an important factor in it. Most children, while growing up, learn about how the world works through their family. If a family is highly male-dominated and the men show superiority above the women, the child would develop their thought processes around that. Perceptions regarding gender roles and parental power structure may impact the career choices of the children. All these stereotypes and thought processes begins at home, and this plays the main role in shaping our career aspirations. The absence of female role models convey that the masculine coloring of science, especially hard sciences such as physics, and is a big feature of our cultural understandings of sciences. This has eventually turned into a cycle that keeps repeating. The cycle where family portrays a particular stereotype about different subject, leading into lesser representation in that subject of that gender, and then using the less representation as another reason to keep building the stereotype around the subject. A big example of this being the lesser representation of women in science and math. Many parents and teachers encourage boys' interest in science more than girls, and parents' beliefs about how difficult and interesting their children find science predict their children's interest and self-efficacy in that science or in that subject. The exposure given to boys in science and math is also comparatively much higher than the exposure given to girls. Next slide, please. The method I used for my research was a survey questionnaire method. I distributed the survey across the schools in the northeastern area of India. A total of 95 students answered the survey from across grades 9 to 12, and all responses were anonymous so that the respondents didn't fear their identity to be revealed or the responses to be used against them. As can be seen in the PPT, the survey consisted of questions in the following areas: demographics, family, and career aspiration. I use these particular fields as they fit into the main parts of my research. I analyze these responses by distributing answers into categories and then scoring them. This helped me find my results for each and every factor that made this topic important, such as male dominance, influence in career aspiration, and what subject is the influence of. Next slide, please. My first result, that is most male-dominated families affect career aspirations in India, This influence may vary according to urbanicity they are in, but to some extent, the influence is seen in most of the male-dominated families. This was the one that I had hypothesized from the beginning of my research. My first shocking finding was that even though males are usually associated with math and science, males in male-dominated households are mainly influenced to go into the fields of commerce and business. I believe that this might be because of the pressure of taking over family businesses. The next was that even though some non-male dominated families have an influence on career aspirations on both males and females, it can be a bit different from the influence by male dominated families. Females in non-male dominated families that have role models in the family generally choose their subjects in high school related to what they might pursue in the future. This is because they grow up looking at role models and feel that they can pursue what they have their interest in. The last and the most important finding of my research was that even though most male dominant families have an influence on career aspiration, some families don't influence career aspiration and let their students or let their children pursue what their own interests are instead of putting on what the parents' thoughts are. This last finding tells us that there is hope in the future that more male-dominated families take up this and the future generations are able to choose what they are interested in. That's all about my research. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much for that, Tanvi. I think the insights you've provided are super topical, and it definitely sounds like it's something that's derived from your context and your experiences, which I think always makes research that much more magical and impactful. So I really appreciate you and Siobhan taking the time to really delve into something within your community and see what you can share with the rest of the world. I think these findings are so valuable. And with that, we close the scholar presentations for the spring cohort of 2022. It has been absolutely wonderful to hear all of you sort of go through this process and share your research with us. So as our sort of final notes and concluding notes, I will pass it over to Stephen.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I just want to quickly end by again thanking all of you and also note that research doesn't end at doing this program. Of course, as Chanel and Elon both prove out that you can do research with Lumiere, of course, multiple times. But I would say much more importantly is that this is step one in a much longer journey of trying to figure out like just cool things. Like, why does the world work? I think one of the things that Sonny said at the very beginning is this idea of curiosity, like that being a theme that both exists in research and a theme that exists in pretty much any profession that you choose to do. And so I just want to say a big thank you to all of you and remark on how proud I am of the real curiosity you've shown and the curiosity I hope that you guys continue to have as you go through your next step. So thank you. I think we'll wrap up right here, but thank you so much everyone for joining, and for those students who presented, congratulations. And for all the students, congratulations on finishing your research. Say goodbye, use my meager authority to wave goodbye to people. Goodbye, everyone.